And as promised, here's Janice Stein, TVO's Foreign Affairs Analyst and Director at the Munk School of Global Affairs. Well, it just gets, it keeps getting and getting and getting. Let's just, before we talk about Gadhafi, show the map of Libya and remind people that this is, of course, large country in northern Africa on the Mediterranean Sea. Only 6.5 million people across a territory 7 times the size of the United Kingdom. Median age just over 24 years of age. Unemployment rate at 30% plus.
For the young.
For the young.
Yes.
And Moammar Gadhafi gave a speech today. I mean, he's given some wacky speeches over the years, but this one may, well, let's let it speak for itself. Roll tape, please, Michael.
I have paid the price of my remaining here. My grandfather has fell martyr in the war before. It's not possible that I leave this place. I will be a martyr at the end.
What'd you think?
Well, that was a deeply disturbing speech. It was deeply disturbing, Steve, in the first instance, because there are some disconnects with what's happening in his own country. It's clear that he is not aware of what is happening, or is at least pretending that he's not aware. Either way, he talked about the fact that he would not use force at the same time as there was large-scale violence last night, use of helicopter gunships,
on unarmed civilians.
On unarmed civilians who were killed in apparently very large numbers. We still don't have accurate data. Right. And here he gets up and says, I'm not going to use force. You have to ask yourself, how connected is this man to what's happening inside his own country?
He's given lots of speeches, though, over the years, which, from a Western point of view, appear to be these kind of endless stream of conscience. Like, where is he going? What in the heck is he saying? Was this another one of those?
Well, there were some themes in that speech which were not like that. One, he went over the history of Libya over and over and over again, in which he talked about the experience with the colonizers. The Italians, the British, the terrible experience that Libya has had, and that was the call to arms. So he presented himself as a great liberator. So that is a familiar theme. Then he went to, of course, it's all about the people. So here we got to the Green Revolution, and he pulled out a green book, which may appear to viewers that it was his green book. It actually wasn't. He was reading from the Constitution, so it's not the famous green book. If our viewers look at that. And that's another theme. But what came out was, I can't resign because I have no official position. I'm the leader of the revolution. And then he went on to say to people of Libya, to the parents, get your kids off the streets. They're on drugs and they're brainwashed.
Well, look at this. He described them as gangs, rats, mercenaries under the influences of drugs and alcohol. Accused the protesters of being ungrateful for his leadership. What do you read into that?
Well, that's where the real disconnect is. These are, of course, young people, and more than young people, you have, in fact, an uprising that is pretty widespread in the whole eastern part of the country and along the Mediterranean coast, from everything we know. But that's the only way he can process this. And what came out in the speech, even in the voice of the translator, but you could see it in his body language, this defiance, this anger, and the only way he can comprehend what's happening, he can't admit or acknowledge that it's a revolt against his own autocratic and arbitrary rule. It's got to be kids on drugs.
What's the, let me take advantage here of the fact that you've been in that part of the world before and you've talked to people who know that part of the world. You've seen it yourself firsthand. Is he all there?
That's a really hard question to answer. Let me answer it this way. Is he strategic? Does he know what he wants to do? And does he move in a direction that he wants to do it? Very often, yes. Let me give you just 2 examples. When he went to Paris and pitched his tent in the middle of the Champs-Élysées, right? I mean, that wasn't by accident. He was making a strong statement about who he is, a desert leader, pure, uncorruptible, which is, by the way, not true. He is a huge funder in Africa. He's probably, after China, the biggest funder. So when he goes down, because I think he will, that's going to have a significant impact. Is he all there all the time? He lives, I think, partly in a world that he's constructed for himself, and he's unable really, as he showed today, to process information in anything that you and I would consider a reasonable manner on an issue that he feels passionately about.
Maybe I was being too colloquial about it. I mean, is he mentally unbalanced, you know? I mean, is he really delusional?
Let's put it this way. He has huge blind spots.
Well, that's a kind way of putting it, I guess.
Yeah, because, you know, to say mentally unwell or delusional would assume that he can't function in any way at any time. I don't think that's right. I think he has huge, huge blind spots, and you saw it, my God, in that speech today.
We have seen other Arab leaders, when things get tough, start to say, I'm your last best hope against Arab fundamentalism.
Yes.
And we heard it from him again today.
Yes.
Is that legit?
No. And again, that's what, you know, you heard Mubarak say it over and over and over again. And it's almost, that's the trope that you hear from everybody. Don't overthrow me, because if you do, you will, what you will get is an Islamicist regime. Now, it's quite interesting, in the city of Benghazi, which he apparently has lost control of, that's on the eastern side of the map that you showed our viewers, there were reports coming out last night, and again, it's so hard, Steve, because we don't have really accurate information because everything's shut down, but there were reports that people had declared an Islamic Republic of Benghazi. So certainly there are Islamic organizations that informally are operating in a field that is absolutely chaotic because there are no political parties in Libya. But again, to use this specter of Islamic fundamentalism, which Mubarak has used, which Ben Ali used in Tunisia, and which Gadhafi used, is simply not true.
Well, he also read from a long list of crimes under Libyan law that are punishable by death, and it makes one wonder whether, given what he, you know, he may be out of touch, but he knows what happened in Egypt and he knows what happened in Tunisia. Yeah. Those leaders aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
Is Tiananmen Square his model right now?
Oh yeah, there's no question about it, and he actually referred to Tiananmen Square in the speech, and obviously this was the model, you know, crack down with every bit of force. This is now all-out war between the protesters and Gadhafi. For him, he's seen what happened, and by the way, you know, Libya is surrounded on one side, there's Egypt, on the other side is Tunisia, so he doesn't have to exercise his imagination. It's right there for him to see. If he backs down, he's gone, he's finished. For the protesters, and here's the issue, they know there's no middle ground. It's not as if they're going to simply retreat to their homes. They're a thuggish army, which is nothing like the Egyptian army, who will go all out. There is no safe haven for either side now in this conflict, and that's why he's right.
Let's play this out a little bit. Michael, can I ask you to put the map up one more time? I know we've seen it a couple of times, but I've got another question coming out of this. Okay, there's the country. There's an east-west divide in Libya.
Yes.
The east is where the protests have been the strongest. You pointed out what just took place in Benghazi, or what we think is taking place there. It's less populated, but it holds more of the oil wealth.
That's a key point.
Well, could this actually have the effect, these protests, if they, you know, get more intense, of actually physically splitting the country?
I think that we're on the verge of a civil war in Libya. And from everything we understand, Steve, he has lost control of the east, and he's lost control of the string of cities along the Mediterranean coast, and that's the oil territory.
So what are the two, if it's a civil war, what are the two sides?
Well, it's going to be Gadhafi and the tribes, and because Libya is a tribal system, which unlike other Arab countries, because tribes operate in many Arab societies, but unlike Arab countries, Gadhafi has deliberately kept the tribes intact, in office, and the governance system is nothing like what you and I might recognize. It is in fact a committee of tribal leaders, which is backed up by committees, green committees, revolutionary committees at the local level, and he called for the formation of more of these. So there is a possibility of a deep split between different tribal leaders. Some will support the protesters, some will support him, and we've already had some tribal leaders come out aligned with the protesters and the opposition. So we are in a civil war fundamentally already.
So but this is not necessarily a Shia-Sunni thing.
It is not.
These group of tribes against those group of tribes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for the western part, for those in Tripoli, in which there is, from everything we understand, house-to-house fighting going on, losing control of the oil fields in Libya means losing control of the revenue and the capacity to sustain everything that Gadhafi does. So that is the key.
Tell me what you're reading into this. We've seen several high-ranking diplomats and several high-ranking military officials, I guess the word is defect.
Yes.
I mean, they've gone to the other side. Is this important?
It tells us something about the disaffection with Gadhafi at the senior levels. You know, diplomats are never really crucial, I hate to say. They are not the deciders in any society, frankly. They're the most exposed to what people in the world think of Gadhafi. So it's not surprising that, for example, at the UN, virtually the whole Libyan delegation, except for the ambassador, who is now standing in opposition to the rest of the delegation, came out and defected. But pilots defected. And actually, that was to me the most interesting. Yesterday, we had 2 Air Force pilots fly their fighters, which are old, decrepit, Soviet-era fighters, which you don't see anymore, to Malta and defect. And you look at this army, Steve, there couldn't be a stronger contrast between the Libyan army and the Egyptian army. The Egyptian army, professional, disciplined, connected to society.
Revered.
Revered. Would not use force against the Egyptians. And you know, Mubarak was told that from the word go. This army, ill-disciplined, ill-equipped, untrained, has lost every engagement it's ever fought, frankly, in any serious way under Gadhafi, and willing to use helicopter gunships to fire on Libyan citizens. It's direct opposite of what we saw in Egypt.
Libya's got the 9th largest proven reserves of oil and is among the top 15 in oil exporters. If this doesn't calm down, what's going to happen to the price of oil? Do I need to ask?
You don't need to ask that one. The price of oil certainly over the short term will go up.
9% up today.
I'm not surprised because what it does is it rattles oil markets everywhere, and what investors hate more than anything else is uncertainty. The country that's really concerned here, though, is Italy, because Italy is the largest consumer of Libyan oil. Let's not exaggerate, though. OPEC oil is about 35%, that's all, of world oil. So the disruption of Libya's oil exports alone is not sufficient to disrupt world supply.
Finally, Janice, and we're not really in the prediction game here. We try to do more analysis than prediction, but the fact is you were in that chair a few weeks ago and you called Egypt right. And you did drop a little hint earlier in our conversation that you think Gadhafi is not long for us.
Oh no, I think he's finished.
When?
Well, when?
We talking days? We talking weeks?
I
Months?
think we're in for terrible violence in Libya, in which we will have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of civilians killed. I think for those who are now out in the streets opposed to him, they cannot retreat. They have nowhere to go, Steve. They will lose their lives if they retreat. So there's only one way, which is the way forward. And there is enough disaffection, and the army is fractured enough and incompetent enough that I think he's finished.
Someone takes him out?
You know, that's the problem here, and that's something I think that makes this so difficult. In Egypt, the army was organized enough to go to Mubarak and say very, very gently, my friend,
yeah, time's up.
Time's up.
Yeah.
The army here is so incompetent and so fractured, and he is so defiant and so out of touch that the mechanism of moving him out is going to be much, much, much more difficult than it was in Egypt. And that's why we're going to have, I think, really awful violence. Security Council is going to meet tonight. I don't think anything the Security Council will do or can do can prevent the violence.
We'll all stay tuned. Janice, as always, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.